The Wii in 2009. I think that sentence stands alone for itself. Wii Sports, Mario Galaxy, Mario Kart, Super Smash Bros. Brawl, Twilight Princess, Metroid Prime 3. It was an era I'm sure we all look back on with fond memories. But even the more mature side of the Wii never really dipped above a T for teen rating. I mean, why would they? Mature games go to the consoles more popular with that audience. It makes sense. It seems though that one publisher didn't get the memo, or maybe intentionally didn't listen. Violent, crass, and artistically striking, Platinum Games' debut title landed them and Nintendo in some steamy waters, and itself under the ban hammer in one country. The game in question,
Second place. It's a Madworld. Wanna play? Rated M for mature.
The first question that comes to mind when anyone looks at this game is probably going to be, why? Why the Wii? When Platinum first started development, they were after a fun game for the Wii that included a higher level of violence. The reason being that it would set itself apart from the other games on the console. And, I mean, they were right. Yet with this game's art style, it sets itself apart from more than just the Wii's catalogue. I can't think of any other game that actually looks like this. Really, the only other forms of media I can compare this game to visually is Sin City. The game's directors acknowledged the Frank Miller influence, as well as other Western and Japanese comic book styles and motifs. Motion capture was also used for this game. Sparingly, I hope. As mentioned before, this was Platinum Games' first game. They'd later go on to make classics such as Nier Automata, Metal Gear Rising, and of course, Horny Witch Game, meaning that Madworld's time in the spotlight was soon overshadowed. Judging from articles at the time, it seems Madworld was growing a somewhat steady hype train. It didn't seem like people were going to be lining up at midnight, but for the Wii owners looking for a more mature game that didn't have an underlying furry thing going on, Madworld carved itself out a pretty appealing niche. Get it? Carved out? Sorry, that really sucked. You probably saw that one coming, huh? Yeah, there. Madworld released two generally positive reviews. IGN, Game Informer, and Nintendo Power all gave it a 9 out of 10. IGN UK clearly disagreed, and then IGN Australia disagreed with them. There were detractors though. GameSpot noted its short length, and many others categorized the game as style over substance. The game's content also sparked a fair bit of uproar. In fact, the game was banned in Germany. I'm not too sure why, considering there was far more graphic and certainly realistic content circulating the gaming landscape at the time. But the console it was on might have had something to do with it, I reckon.
Get the whole family around. We've been so looking forward to this Christmas.
The NIMF, or National Institute of Media and the Family, or nearby intriguing Minging Frog, denoted the game's release as the shedding of Nintendo's family-friendly reputation. There aren't many hard numbers when it comes to the sales or profitability of Madworld, but it sadly wasn't the runaway success publisher Sega was hoping for. I'm sure Sega was banking on Americans eating this game up, but the North American region sold around 400,000 units, with a total of 780,000 globally. Except Germany. Who knows, they may have bumped those numbers up a little bit.
Fortnite und trink Cola! Yippee!
Fun little fact, the game shares the same box art in every region, but Japan got a black banner and case. Apparently, starting around this time, every game given a CERO rating of C or above, which is 15 and over, would grant the game a black case. And objectively, that is what the industry calls looking pretty cool. But it's about time we got into the meat and potatoes of this thing, huh? The game takes place in Varagon City, a fictional city that doesn't not look like New York. A group of terrorists named the Organizers destroy the city's transportation and communication infrastructure, effectively cutting it off from the rest of the world. A virus is then released into Varagon City that will eliminate the population within 24 hours. There, however, is a vaccine, but in order to receive it, a person must kill another. Logically, the city is then transformed into a game show known as Death Watch. Participants work their way up the ranks by racking up kills, with the top-ranked player winning a cash prize. The game follows Jack Kamen, voiced by Stephen Bloom, who you'll probably recognize as Spike from Cowboy Bebop, or Tank Dempsey for my little zombies freaks out there.
Player, Drop the chips and get me some ammo!
The organisers soon discovered that Jack is a previous winner, and with contact to the outside, his intentions seem to be more than just winning. No time to dwell on that though, as you're off to rescue a hospital worker who somehow found himself in the middle of Asian Town. You know, not Asia Town, Asian Town. Jack is quick to let him know though that he is not there to save lives. Jack is suspected to be sent into the city to rescue the mayor's daughter, Naomi. Once you manage to brawl, shred, and signpost your way through the opening levels and get to Naomi, she seems awfully cheery about the whole citywide hellscape she's in.
You people are enjoying this. This is all part of your opening ceremony.
I have absolutely...
Turns out Naomi was having a housewarming party of sorts and wanted her hero from her favourite show as a guest of honour. After it's revealed that the mayor knows nothing about Naomi's obsession with Deathwatch, Jack... Well, that's not great, probably didn't need to do that. Now, working with seemingly no mission objective, Jack sets off to climb the leaderboards and dismantle Deathwatch from the inside.
Wait, what work?
Madworld is a hack-and-slash beat-em-up game. It's a typical Platinum Games affair, but this time it's a little bit slower. Whether that was a hardware limitation of the Wii or a gameplay-driven decision, it takes a more slower and methodical approach. Let's get this out of the way first. The kills in this game are gory, creative, and visceral. A handful of these executions will elicit a decent bit of shock from most players, even if they know what they're getting into. Deathwatch relies on a point-based scoring system. The more prolonged and intricate a particular kill is, the more points it generates. Yeah, look, you could chainsaw a guy straight up, but what if you stab him with a street sign first, and then combo that with a trash can? And then, while we're at it, just make it a boxed meal, chuck him into a wall of spikes. Or a giant turbine, or a massive hot plate, or a massive... While taking care of business, the gameplay is narrated by two very familiar voices. Greg Proops of Whose Line Is It Anyway fame, and John DiMaggio, the voice of Bender and Jake the dog.
Compare your lives to mine and then kill yourselves.
The commentary does a lot to break up the gameplay. There were definitely more than a couple interactions between the two hosts that gave me a good laugh.
That reminds me, I gotta make an appointment to see my proctologist. Anything serious? Right now we're just friends.
And along with the art style and banging soundtrack, it gives this game a real unique identity. Look, I would say it's strange hearing such depravity come from the voice of Jake, but after the whole
I'm jaking it,
it's a bit less confronting. The game wears its grungy, edgy tone of voice proudly. There are some lines of dialogue though that maybe don't hold up today.
No means yes, and yes means anal.
But given the context of the game and the time in which it came out, I'm not saying it's defensible, it's more that I can see why it happened.
He did just enough to pass. Isn't that how you got through school? Nope, I slept with the teacher. I figured my education was worth that. I hope she was hot. She?
But this game is not to be taken seriously. Yes, the plot may have some anti-government and big pharma narratives, but don't look into this game for any 45-minute long deep dish dive pizza, because what you see here is what you get. The blood and gore is comical by most accounts. The over-the-top nature in which characters die, not to mention the amount of them, quickly moves from shocking to mostly gruesome slapstick.
Fuck me, that's what I call a finishing move.
Character designs themselves are also very cool. It reminds me a lot of 90s comic book styles with the very maximalist approach, sometimes a very maximalist approach.
I've seen these guys and they're ugly as sin. Worst models ever.
Modelers, not models, you idiot.
They're still ugly.
Levels mostly consist of traversing a linear stage or sandbox, racking up enough points to unlock a boss fight. The boss fights are where this game really shines though. There's a great variety of creative bosses and fights that will have you dodging and timing attacks in order to land some pretty devastating hits. However, given the game's fairly rudimentary moveset, it makes a lot of the boss fights feel the same, or at least involve the same actions. Each stage also includes a bloodbath challenge, hosted by the Black Baron, the #1 ranked challenger on Deathwatch. They can range from throwing a guy onto a target, to baseball batting them onto a target, or shaking up champagne and sawing them into another target. There are other challenges though, which involve you killing enemies in a particular way, or even sending them to a driving range. These do a decent job at breaking up the levels, but some of them, particularly these champagne ones, where you don't have a lot of control, can become rather aggravating. Which unfortunately does bring me to the controls part of this video. This is a Wii game from 2009, and not to stereotype, but that means that motion controls was still a novel concept. Light attacks are done with the A button, heavy attacks are performed by swinging, and you can use your chainsaw by holding down B and swinging. Games like Skyward Sword don't really bother me. Whilst there's a heavy reliance on motion controls, they're fairly intuitive and not too tiring to perform. But with Madworld, because of the amount of enemies that the player has to deal with, getting into some of these fights will just have you swinging your Wiimote wildly, and this can become a bit draining. Look, it's fun for the first few times it happens, but it quickly wears thin. In addition, the game also loves a good quick time segment. You've probably seen them pop up in the gameplay, but the boss fights mostly consist of light punches or chainsaw attacks until you get a quick time event pop up. Cue about 5 seconds of flailing your Wiimote in a particular direction, or sometimes in combination with the nunchuck, rinse and repeat until the health bar is drained. Dodging is also performed by swinging the nunchuck. Not only can landing attacks be time sensitive, but dodging even more so sometimes. So when the dodging mechanic is linked to motion controls, it can sometimes feel like my actions aren't necessarily being registered in time, if even at all. A game like this would have worked much better on a regular control setup. Having specific buttons for dodging would have made this a far more enjoyable and less strenuous adventure. Additionally, the camera in this game is horrific. Almost all Wii games have this problem, but not being able to freely move the camera around tight corridors makes claustrophobic segments a real battle, and not with the enemies, but with my patience. Pair this with swarms of enemies, occasionally unresponsive controls, and Madworld becomes a perfect synonym for frustrating and repetitive gameplay. Unfortunately, that's not the only thing that's repetitive in this game. Whilst the two announcers do have quite a few voice lines, no game can seemingly escape the over-repeated voice line trope. Sometimes they'll just repeat the same line back to back. Death animations are varied but do repeat and can take quite a while. An option to skip them would have been much appreciated, especially when some levels will have you doing them over and over again to achieve enough points to even get to the boss fight. Oh, and if you happen to die in that boss fight with no lives remaining, you have to start the entire level again. There are also motorbike segments which, again, don't have much depth to them, but are a nice break from the slower tank controls. Also, the boss fight on your bike is pretty cool. Again, it's basically just smacking into a guy until you get a quick time event, but at least the setting is a lot different this time. The game ain't very long. It's only about 5-ish hours in length, so these annoyances aren't very prolonged. Actually, by this point, it's probably about time to talk about the ending. Look, the story gets fairly intense at this point, and there was a lot going on. I was not paying attention. It was YouTube short time. Sorry. Anyways, the gist is Deathwatch originally ended but was rebooted by a pharmaceutical company whose stock price tanked following an illegal presidential campaign donation. Leo, the doctor from before, is revealed to be working with the leader of Deathwatch, Noah. Noah? Of course I don't know her. I've never met her.
Shut the fuck up!
After defeating the Black Baron and now being crowned number 1, Noah confronts Jack before he is shot by Leo. Turns out Leo is the son of the pharma company's CEO. He too was obsessed with the games and wanted to be as close to the action as possible. Jack doesn't take to his plight very well, and look, well, he puts it pretty bluntly.
I don't help people. I kill them.
Madworld is an interesting take on beat-em-ups. You can tell what direction Platinum wanted to take their future titles. Look, overall the game is fun, and if you're interested, it's just like Ozempic, no harm in giving it a try. But if you play the first 3 levels and you're not feeling it, that's what the rest of the game is going to be like. It is very repetitive. It's over-the-top, combat-focused fun. There is a story if you wish to look into it, but if you're like me, it isn't what brought you to the game. What brings you to the game is the art style. Is there much beyond that? That's for you to decide. I hesitate to label this game as style over substance, but strip away this game's art style and you're left with an average hack and slash with infuriating controls, a pretty banging soundtrack, and an all-star voice cast. If this game wasn't tied to the motion controls and instead on a console like the PlayStation 3, I think it would have fared a little bit better. Madworld ultimately accomplished what it wanted, in that it did stand out from the Wii's discography. And in regards to the controversy about this game on a child-centered console, I think Bender said it best.
Have you ever tried simply turning off the TV, sitting down with your children, and hitting them?